Material world means they come back to the earthly planets. They come back to these bhuloka. So that's how. So that aspect is spoken in this particular chapter. So now let's study this chapter. Okay. So chapter 31, Lord Kapila's instructions on the movements of the living entity. So under that movement, this is actually Rajasi Gati, the destinations achieved by mode of ignorance, mode of passion. So in this chapter, you can see what are the contents. So this is Sridhar Swami's Bhavartha Deepika. So his Karika says, Ekatrimshe Vimishraisthu Punya Papaya Rihantara Manushya Yoni Sampraptir Varnyate Rajasi Gatihi. So he says, Sridhar Swami says in the 31st chapter, Ekatrimshe, Rajasi Gatihi Varnyate. What is described is the Rajasi Gati, is the destination achieved which is in the mode of passion. So, what is that Rajasi Gati? It is Manushya Yoni Samprapti. It is actually attainment of the human species. One becomes a human being, especially on the Martyaloka, I mean within that Bhuloka, we say, in the Manushya Yoni. What kind of activities lead to such a destination? Vimishrai punya papai ihantara. So it actually is caused by mixed punya and papa. So the life is not, predominantly papi, sinful, because then the person would have qualified to go to hellish planets. And life is also not, such a person's life is also not very pious, like completely pious or predominantly pious. No. It has punya and papa both, some punya, some papa. So it's kind of mixed karma that is there. So what happens is then such a person, madhya tishtanti rajasa, such people, they usually tend to get human form of life in the bhuloka itself. So that aspect is spoken over here in this chapter. Vishwanath Chakravarti also describes the contents of the chapter. Ekatrimshe garbha janma balya pauganda yatanaha bruvane jivasya bhaktir garbhepi darshate. In the 31st chapter, what is shown? Yatana, the suffering. Suffering in terms of suffering in the garbha, in the mother's womb, suffering at the time of birth, suffering as a child, suffering as a pauganda, as an adolescent boy or girl, whatever. So, garbha janma balya pauganda yatana. Suffering in these various phases of life. Bruvane naiva jivasya bhakti hi garbhepi drashyate. And having spoken these things, also spoken is the bhakti that is there of the jiva, that bhakti which is shown in mother's womb, jivasya bhakti garbhepi. Even in the mother's womb, bhakti is seen of a certain jiva, not every jiva here. Very, very fortunate, special jiva. He also shows bhakti in mother's womb. So he prays to the Supreme Lord. So those prayers are spoken. Those beautiful prayers are spoken. So in this way, this chapter talks about suffering in the womb, suffering at the time of birth, suffering as a child, as an adolescent boy, and then also in youth and all that. But before that, the special bhakti of the special jiva, bhagyavan jiva, that is also spoken in this chapter. So that's how we see the chapter is divided. So typically first 11 verses, they will talk about the suffering in mother's womb, garbhe. Then from verse 12 to 21, there are prayers by the jiva. uh, from verse 12 to 21. So those prayers of the jiva are spoken. Then from verses 22 to 31, there is suffering after coming out of mother's womb. That's the topic. And finally, from 32 to end of the chapter, there is especially suffering caused by bad association, dussanga. So that is also a very nice section in which the uh, attachment to women for enjoyment uh, and attachment to those who are attached to women, Yoshit and Yoshit Sangi, such people, that bad association is condemned by uh, Kapila Muni. So that's how those are the contents of this chapter. Okay. So first 11 verses, we will hear about the suffering in the mother's womb. So let's read this now. So Panuram Sharan Prabhu, you can read the translation as an I will call out. So first 11 verses you can read. Shri Bhagavan Karmana Daiva Netreena Janturdehopapattaye Striyah Pravishtahudaram Pumsoreta Kanashrayah.
The personality of Godhead said, under the supervision of Supreme Lord and according to result of his work, the living entity, the soul, is made to enter into the womb of a woman through the particle of male semen to assume a particular type of body.
Yes. So we see that this particular soul, which as per that soul's karma, and also the kind of consciousness of the parents at the time of conceiving the child, uh, on multiple factors, then a certain soul enters into a certain mother's womb. uh, so that aspect, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Kapila Muni is saying. So he is saying, Jantuhu Striyaha Pravishta Udaram. That living entity which is wandering in the cycle of birth and death. Prior chapter ended with a soul having suffered through and having gone through various species, then eventually he comes back to again the human form of life. That was spoken in the last verse. So that in continuation to that, Kapila Muni speaks that. And then now in the human form of life, he takes shelter of a certain mother's womb. Jantu, one who takes birth. For what purpose he enters into mother's womb? Dehopapattaye, in order to receive a certain body. Dehopapattaye, meaning accomplishment of a body, attainment of a body. So how does he enter into a mother's womb? Pumsaha reta kanashraya, by taking shelter of the reta kana, the semen particle of the man, the jantu, the living entity. It enters mother's womb. So which mother's womb it will enter? What sort of parents a living entity attains? So this is determined by the prarabdha. So that aspect is spoken by Karmana Daiva Netrena, these words. Karmana Daiva Netrena. By his karma. So his prarabdha determines actually that what sort of body he is going to get. And this karma is daiva netrena, it is said. So which means that actually the Jivatma, his karma is certainly taken care by, and accordingly the Jivatma is directed to a certain kind of womb by Daiva Netrena. So Daiva here means Paramatma actually, by Paramatma's supervision, by Ishvara's supervision, we see that living entities directed towards a certain womb through semen of a certain man, uh, or so as to continue the sojourn in the material world. So that's the aspect. It's not only karmana and it's not only daiva netrena. It's karmana daiva netrena, which means both the aspects of Paramatma's supervision and sanctioning, and the fundamental aspect of the jiva's karma, like that. So in this way. So actually we see that in Vedic life, in Vedic philosophy, the concept is very clear that by one's own prior karma, one is entering a certain womb, and in is being in a certain situation. That situation may be where he is born with a silver spoon, or he may be born in a ghetto, in a slum, in very poverty-stricken condition. Uh, One may be born with a very strong body, or one may be born with a weakly body. So all these factors are governed by the prarabdha. Otherwise, you say the books of religions like Christianity and Islam or Judaism, they are not able to explain what determines that a certain soul receives uh, billionaire parents, and another soul receives parents who are just below poverty line. So what causes this? You know, so this idea they are not able to explain. Uh, it's just a random thing for them. It just happens to be a very, very random thing, like that. Of course, the ideas there are also quite weird. Some of them think that by conception, a soul is created. Uh, at the time of union, a soul is created. They feel like that. So soul in that way in Christianity is actually not anadi. It is adi, because the soul is generated. It is born. But once born, it remains eternal. So that is ananta. So adi but ananta. That's the Christian idea of the soul. Uh, It's not anadi and ananta. Hmm. That way. So we see that, yeah, those misconceptions also cause a lot of difficulty in explaining why there is suffering in this world. Because if there is no prior karma taken into account, then it appears to be a very unjust kind of world, uh, isn't it? Somebody born in a certain condition, born with a certain body, certain intelligence, and another is just a fool. Uh, Someone may have a great IQ, and other person may be just is a dullard. So how does this all happen? So this aspect of prachin karmana, prior karma, daiva netrena, which is witnessed and noted and rewarded by Paramatma. This aspect is very, very important. Everything is done by the supervision of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material nature supplies the body, but it does so under the direction of the super soul, Daiva Netrena, like that. So he directs material nature to supply a particular type of body to the individual soul, uh, in that particular manner. and the material nature supplies it. Retah kanashrayah is very significant word because it indicates it is not the semen of the man that creates life within the womb of a woman. Rather, the living entity takes shelter. Retah kanashrayah means that the living entity takes the shelter of retah kana, the semen particle. It's not that the life is created there. No, in this way. There is no possibility of creating a living entity without the presence of the soul simply by sexual intercourse. There is just no possibility of creating a living entity, right? You cannot create only living entity, whether by union or by whether by any other way. You can't create a living entity. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuva. Living entities are co-eternal with the Supreme Lord. The energies of the Lord, they are co-eternal with the Supreme Lord. They are never created. Not at all. So that is the point. The materialistic theory that there is no soul and a child is born simply by material combination of sperm and ovum is not very feasible. It doesn't make sense this way. So that's the point here. I'll take the questions at the end of 10 verses only. Let's please note your questions. We will complete first. Karalam tvekaratrena pancharatrena budbudam dashahena tu karkandhu peshandyam va tatah param.
On the first night, the sperm and the ovum mix, and on the fifth night, the mixture ferments into a bubble. On the 10th night, it develops into a form like a plum, and after that, it gradually turns into a lump of flesh or an egg, as the case may be.
Yeah. So we see that these details are also being provided of embryology. That what happens is on the first night after the conceiving, then we see that the sperm and the ovum mix. Fifth night, the mixture ferments into a budbudam, meaning a bubble. On the 10th night, it becomes like a plum. And then finally, it becomes like a lump of flesh. If the species is viviparous, meaning where the offspring is born directly from the womb. If it is oviparous, then we see that in those cases, the egg is formed by the conceiving, and that egg gets formed. So that's the point. So Prabhupada says that there are four kinds of living entities. There are living entities which are born from the seeds, like the trees, plants, and all. Or there are some which are jarayuja, which are viviparous. They are born from the wombs. There are some which are, we see that they are born from the eggs. So, andayuja, that kind of eggs. And some are said to be svedaja also, like that's one another category where some living entities are said to be born from perspiration. Actually, perspiration is the condition in which they flourish. So they are not born from perspiration, but the point is, these bed bugs and such living entities, they very much that condition is very favorable where they are born and then they spread also certain living entities. So they are said to be Svedaja. So Svedaja, Andaja, Jarayuja, and Udbhija. These are the four kinds of living entities in this way. Masena tushirodvabhyam bahvangryadhyanga vigraha nakhalo masthi charmani lingachidrodbhavastribhi.
In the course of a month, A head is formed, and at the end of 2 months, the hands, feet, and other limbs take shape. By the end of 3 months, the nails, fingers, toes, body hair, bones, and skin appear, as do the organ of generation and other apertures in the body, namely the eyes, nostrils, ears, mouth, and anus.
So we can see how the child step by step it grows. So in the course of a month, within a month, a head is formed. And at the end of 2 months, the hands, feet, and other limbs, they take shape. So the ideas of people where, the abortionists and such people, where they think that the child until 4 months, there is no consciousness and such ideas, actually, they are not very right ideas. Uh, by the end of 3 months, in fact, there is significant growth of even things like nails, fingers, toes, body hair. So why are these things growing? They are growing only because there is life within that, no? Uh, so by the end of 3 months, in fact, the body starts appearing to be like with proper all the limbs and organs. चतुर्भिर्धातवः सप्त क्षुत्रुड उद्भवः षड्भिर्जरायुणा वीतः कुक्षौ भ्राम्यति दक्षिणे. Yes, Prabhu.
Within the 4 months from the date of conception, the seven essential ingredients of the body, namely child, blood, flesh, fat, bone, marrow, and semen, come into existence. At the end of 5 months, hunger and thirst make themselves felt. And at the end of 6 months, the fetus, enclosed by the amnion, begins to move on the right side of the abdomen.
So the Sapta Dhatus, all the Sapta Dhatus like blood, flesh, fat, chyle, bone, marrow, and all that, they come into existence at the end of 4 months. At the end of 5 months, hunger and thirst start appearing in the child. At the end of 6 months, the fetus, the child, he starts in fact moving to the right side of the abdomen. Prabhupada quotes that when the body of the child is completely formed at the end of 6 months, if the child is male, then begins to move on the right side of the abdomen. And if the child is a female, she tries to move on the left side. Uh, so there is some information which is available in Ayurvedic Shastras in detail about this. There is also one Garbhopanishad. Uh, this is a Upanishad. This is an Upanishad spoken by Pipalad. And this Garbhopanishad also, Garbha Upanishad. It talks about the suffering in the Garbha. It's one of the 108 Upanishads. And it's quite popular actually, Garbhopanishad. So it talks about these aspects of prayers in the womb of a mother done by the child. It also talks about the step by step how the embryo grows in mother's womb. Mm. And then the later text of Ayurveda, like Vagbhat Samhita and Sushrut Samhita, they give details of what happens in the mother's womb, how to like how do the male child and female child they grow within the womb. All those aspects are spoken in Ayurvedic texts also. So Prabhupada seems to be speaking from those Ayurvedic texts and knowledge. Text 5. Matur jagdanha panadyair edhadhatur sammate shete vinmutra yorgarte sajantur jantu sambhave.
De- Deriving its nutrition from the food and drink taken by the mother, the fetus grows and remains in that abominable residence of stool and urine. which is the breeding place of all kinds of worms.
Yeah. So we see that the child, he is connected by umbilical cord uh, to the mother's belly. So in this way, we see that the nourishment of the child happens, and the child, he is lying there uh, in that jarayu, or it's called amniotic sac in embryology. So in that amniotic sac, the child is lying over there, and just next to him is the breeding place of all these worms, and sometimes, I mean, the intestines are there, and the bladder is just surrounding him, and also the rectum and all these parts where we see that it's basically surrounded by these bags of stool and urine, and uh, places where all sorts of worms may be spawning also, right? The intestinal tracts and all that. So that's why it is being said here that Shete Vindmutra Yor Garte. As such, the child in that amniotic sac, he is separated from these things because the sac covers him. But still, because just outside of that sac, these things are there. Sometimes the bladder pushes also uh, this aspect, this amniotic sac, or yeah, all these other reactions that happen in the belly, the acids and all that created. So that also causes trouble to the child because that amniotic sac surface is also very delicate, uh, like that. So that's why. Although within the amniotic sac, there are no worms or anything because it's a sterile environment. So the worms cannot survive there. Uh, but the whole body itself is, you can see, right? It is a place of bag of stool and urine and worms and all that. So that's why it is mentioned, Shete Vindmutrayo Garte. He lies there in the bag of stool and urine. Sa Jantu Jantu Sambhave. The place where it is a breeding place of all the kinds of worms like tapeworms, and sometimes all these living entities, because of diseases and all, they may be there in intestinal tracts uh, this way. So that's how its situation is not very good now. It is horrible situation. The child is there, but if you, Prabhupada later says also, if a grown-up man were to be put up in such situation, in that arched position, right? How the child is like an arch, uh, completely like a bow, and in such a small cavity that is there, in upside down condition, the head is below, the feet are on top. So it's a very suffering condition. Since the child depends completely on assimilated foodstuff of the mother, during pregnancy, there are restrictions on the food taken by the mother. Uh, If the mother does not follow these restrictions, what happens? Too much salt, chili, onion, similar food. Actually, pungent food is forbidden for a pregnant mother, right? Because what happens is the reactions caused by such pungent food, then they burn the child's body also. It is too delicate. So that's why it's important that those things are followed. Uh, Restrictions and precautions to be taken by pregnant mother, as enunciated in Smriti scriptures of Vedic literatures, are very useful. We can understand from Vedic literature how much care is taken to beget a nice child in society. The Garbhadan Sanskar, we see that it is directing towards bringing out in this world a child who is healthy, mentally, physically, spiritually, like that. So that's why all these Garbhadan Samskar, Garbha Samskaras, they took care of all these aspects. The Garbhadan ceremony before sexual intercourse was compulsory for persons in the higher grades of society. So that's why in Kali Yuga, everybody is considered a Shudra, because hardly anyone undergoes Garbhadan Samskar, right? Sometimes even in a very quote unquote high class families, these aspects may not be there because of complete ignorance. There is no Garbhadhan Sanskar that is performed and all that. To take care of the child is the primary duty of the one sec, of the parents. Because if such care is taken, society will be filled with good population. So that is the aspect Prabhupada is highlighting. Kramibhikshata sarvangah saukumaryat pratikshanam murcham apnoti urukleshas tatratyai kshudhitayar muhu.
Bitten again and again all over the body by hungry worms in the abdomen itself. The child suffers terrible agony because of his tenderness. He thus becomes unconscious moment after moment because of terrible condition.
Yeah. So those worms and those microbes and all that within the womb, and they may cause some suffering to the child, even though the child is placed within that amniotic sac. But still, uh, these conditions can cause trouble to the child because of it's very, very delicate condition, right? Uh, it is so delicate that even the other limbs within the body, they within the belly can also sometimes press that bag, amniotic sac. So it's actually, yes, it's a very vulnerable and uh, very delicate condition. But by Lord's amazing arrangement, by Mother Nature's amazing arrangement, by Supreme Lord's direction, we see that this complex scenario and Lord takes care of the child, and then eventually the child falls out of the womb. Uh, The miserable condition of material existence is not only felt when we come out of the womb, but it is also present within the womb. So Krishna is saying that's why Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. Krishna says that one should be very alert to understand the specific difficulties of birth and death. So birth is a suffering, no doubt about it. Just because coming out of mother's womb, one may forget that suffering doesn't mean there was no suffering, right? There was suffering. That condition is actually of a great suffering in that condition, in such an enclosed space like that. And we see that it's not a very uh, palatable condition. That's why Shastras see Janma also as a great suffering. The birth itself, meaning being in mother's womb, is suffering, and coming out is another greater suffering because it will open up now the suffering to be caused by, you know, the adhibautik, the other living entities can also cause direct suffering now. At least inside mother's womb, whatever, if the worms are there and such things may give trouble, but outside now, one is immune, one is vulnerable to all the suffering from all the people of this world, uh, this way. So that's why it is considered to be a suffering. Just as during the formation of this body, we have to pass through so many difficulties. Similarly, at the time of death also there are difficulties. So Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. Dukkha doshanu darshanam. Anu means santatam, again and again. Again and again one should consider these sufferings of the material world and should not get into illusion thinking something to be uh, having some sort of dreamy-eyed conception about the material world. So these realities of life, Krishna is saying, one should do anudarshanam. One should see the world with open eyes. See that suffering in the world. It is not being pessimistic, but it is being realistic. Uh, Otherwise, we'll forget the nature of the material world, and we'll be completely forgetful of the Supreme Lord because of influence of Maya, right? That's how Maya causes actually. She causes forgetfulness of the real nature of the material world. That's why Krishna is saying Anudarshanam. Again and again, constantly, one sees these aspects. Not that we become paranoid by thinking about these things. Oh, like some paranoia is there, right? Psychological dread is there. Not like that. But one remains sober in this world. One remains grave and sober that this place is not a very wonderful place to be. Although motivational speakers and all may want us to believe these sort of things, but it's not a fact. Shastra does not speak like that. Uh, Shastra speaks very positively about the spiritual world, bhakti, and how that bhakti can cause in the material world also very positive environment. But not that material world itself is seen as some very wonderful place. No, not like that. कटुतीक्ष्णोष्ण लवण रुक्षाम्लादिभिरुल्बनै मातृभुक्तैरुपस्पृष्टः सर्वांगोत्थित वेदनः. Yes, Prabhu.
Moving to mothers eating bitter, pungent foodstuffs or food which is too salty or too sour, the body of the child incessantly suffers pains which are almost intolerable.
Yeah. Because his consciousness is not very developed, the child can tolerate it. Otherwise, he would die. Uh, Prabhupada is saying all description of the child's bodily situation in the womb of the mother are beyond our conception. That's the point. In these conditions, the person who is completely developed in consciousness may not be able to even survive. But the child is able to because the consciousness is not fully developed. It gets slowly, and at the 7 months, then it is fully developed. Otherwise, he would die. The consciousness is there right from conception. The point is, it is developing slowly. The soul is there means consciousness is there. But how much of that is manifesting? That is the point. That is the benediction of Maya, who endows the suffering body with the qualifications for tolerating such terrible tortures. उल्बेन संवृतस्तस्मिन् अन्त्रैश्च बहिरावृतः आस्ते कृत्वा क्षिरः कुक्षौ भुग्नपृष्ठः शिरोधरः.
Placed within the amnion of covered outside by the intestines, the child remains lying on one side of the abdomen, his head turned towards his belly, and his back and neck arched like a bow.
Uh, so the condition, the position of the child, that itself is like such a suffering condition. Head is turned towards the belly, like this, like an arch, and back and neck arch like a blow, like a bow, uh, like like yes, a bow, like a dhanush. Uh, so that condition is like it's not even the straight, right? Sleeping peacefully. No, it's very much arched, and the head is below. Uh, the feet are like on top, and then it's like this. So if a grown man were put into such a condition as the child within the abdomen, completely entangled in all respects, it would be impossible for him to live even for a few seconds. If one is put into that condition, a grown up man won't be able to survive in that condition. Unfortunately, we forget all these sufferings and try to be happy in this life. Akalpah swanga cheshtayam shakunta iva panjare tatra labdha smritir daivat karma janma shatodbhavam smaran dirgham anushvasam sharma kim nama vindate.
The child thus remains just like a bird in a cage, without freedom of movement. At that time, if the child is fortunate, he can remember all the troubles of his past 100 births, and he grieves wretchedly. What is the possibility of peace of mind in that condition?
So he cannot do any cheshtas, any movements also, completely in that particular condition. So in that condition, Daivat, by some great fortune, if one is reminded of the suffering of hundreds of life, karma of hundreds of life, so such a child, which is very special by some great fortune, by great karma and mercy of the Lord, that such a child remembers his suffering in the prior hundred lives. So remembering them, he actually sighs, he releases the sigh of the great suffering. And Sharma Kim Nam Vindate, that time, what kind of happiness the child can have? What kind of peace of mind? No. He can remember all the troubles of his past 100 births and he grieves wretchedly. Uh, so that's how. So it happens like sometimes for some children, it doesn't happen for everyone. Uh, Vishwan Chakravarti in verse 11, he comments on this. We will talk about it. Who is reminded of such a suffering and also who prays to the Supreme Lord? That is spoken in text 11. So we'll see it there. After birth, the child may forget about the difficulties of his past lives, but when we are grown up, we can at least understand the grievous tortures undergone at birth and death by reading the authorized scriptures like Srimad Bhagavatam. So someone may say, okay, whatever it is, now I don't remember all that suffering, so it's fine, cool. No, but just because somebody forgets some suffering does not mean that the suffering doesn't matter, right? No, not at all like that. We see that it is a suffering. One has to see objectively. Uh, for that matter, if you go by subjective opinion of people, then even if they are suffering, then also they may say, oh, that's okay. Some suffering should be there so as to appreciate happiness. So subjectivity is not the factor here. The objective opinion of Shastras, that's the factor, like that, right? Otherwise, people have their own ideas. Everybody is a philosopher. But only thing is they're philosopher. Uh, fool, philosopher. They speak sophistry, but it is suitable for fools only. They're not philosophers. But yeah, they have their opinion of life, right? Why suffering is there, this, that. One who does not take heed of these indications of suffering in human existence is said to be Atmaha, undoubtedly committing suicide. This way. आरभ्य सप्तमासा आरभ्य सप्तमान मासा लब्धबोधोऽपि वेपितः नैकता नैकत्रास्ते सूतिवातैर्विष्ठा भूरिव सोदरः.
Thus, endowed with the development of consciousness from the seventh month after his conception, the child is tossed downward by the airs that press the embryo during the weeks preceding delivery. Like the worms born of the same filthy abdominal cavity, he cannot remain in one place.
Yeah. So we see that there is full development of consciousness from seventh month uh, after the conception. So then at that point of time, child starts feeling all different aspects of pain and that inconvenience in that position and everything uh, like that. But still, he has to be in that place. Child is tossed downward by the airs, those sutivatai, those airs which airs of parturition, they push the child. So we see that he remains there in that womb. Uh, Vishta bhuri vasodaraha. All these worms within the womb, other worms or living beings, microbes and all that, they are said to be like his sodara. Sodara means they are like his brothers, because they are also born from the same womb of the mother. Uh, At the end of the seventh month, the child is moved by bodily air and does not remain in the same place. For entire uterine system becomes slackened before delivery. So that's how. The worms have been described here as Sodara. Sodara means born of the same mother. So Prabhupada gives very interesting point. He says that under these circumstances, the child and worms are actually brothers. We are very anxious to establish universal brotherhood, but we should take into consideration that even the worms are our brothers. What to speak of other living entities? Prabhupada is saying universal brotherhood you can establish, but you understand that all are coming from same mother or same father. Just like these worms are also brothers of the child. So interesting. Text 11, before the prayer start, this is the last verse. Nathamana rishibhir, Nathamana rishirбhitah saptavadri kritanjalihi stuvitatam viklavaya vacha yeno darer pitah. Yes, good.
The living entity in this frightful condition of life, bound by seven layers of material ingredients, prays with folded hands, appealing to the Lord, who has put him in that condition.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So in that condition, we see that Nathamana. Nathamana means Yachamana. Nathamana means one who is begging. Uh, that is called Nathamana. That child is said to be Rishi. Interesting, no? Why is the child being said to be Rishi? The sage or the self-realized sage, philosopher. Bhitaha, the child who is frightened. Saptavadri, he has the body made up of seven dhatus. Kritanjali, by folding the hands, the child. It is said, such a child, stuvitatam viklavaya vacha. With a faltering voice, such a child, actually, stuvita means he should. Such a child should glorify that Supreme Lord, Yeno Darer Pitah, by whom he was placed in the mother's womb. So, how is it possible to say should? Because you can't instruct a child in the womb, right? So, Vishwan Chakravarti says that this is a different usage of Sanskrit, where it means that the child, it is called Hetu Hetu Matorling. So, what does it mean is this actually refers to a particular child only who had practiced bhakti in his prior life, a great amount of bhakti. That is why now he is praying in mother's womb. It is not that every child prays like this. No. So only a child who has practiced bhakti in his prior life and a great deal of bhakti he has practiced. And that's why such a child is given the remembrance in mother's womb in this particular life. And the proof of such a child who has prayed in mother's womb is what? Srila Jiva Goswami says the proof is such a child will go back home, back to Godhead in that same lifetime. He will attain moksha in the same life. Then we can say that such a child has prayed in the mother's womb. So that's the last birth for such a child. ऐसे नहीं कि वो ही इज प्रेइंग इन मदर्स वomb और फिर बाहर आके फिर मजे कर रहा है. Not like that. That child, you will see that right from childhood, the child is, as soon as basically his Krishna consciousness is revived, then that extraordinary devotional service would manifest, by which the person will go back to the Lord, he will attain moksha in that same very lifetime. This is the opinion of Jiva Goswami and also Vishwanath Chakravarti on this. That's why the child is called Rishi. He is not some just a normal child. He is said to be Rishi over there. Of course, Prabhupada does translate it as living entity. But yes, that Rishi also means this aspect of the sage, actually. The child is said to be the sage, Rishi, in this way. And who can remember, these sort of memories in the mother's womb? So Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes Garbhopanishad, and he says that this sort of remembrance in mother's womb can happen for yogis also. It can happen for jnanis also. So he says, but what they will remember is, jnani will remember the Sankhya principles or jnana principles. And a yogi will remember yogic principles, but a bhakta will remember the Supreme Lord. And he will also pray to the Supreme Lord. So the prayers happen by actually devotee child. Others, they may be reminded of certain practices that they do, but they may not be praying to the Supreme Lord. So this is the aspect. So normal child, there is no question only. He doesn't pray in mother's womb. But even amongst the very special children, the point is this, that it depends upon what path they have practiced. So you can see here, I'm showing, this is Vishwanath Chakravarti's Sararth Darshini. And he says over here, Sadhyam Yogam Samabhyasyet Purusham Panchavimshakam. So he's quoting from Garbhopanishad Vakyam. So what happens? Kaschit karmi jivo, if somebody has followed the path of karma, karma kand, so then such a jiva in mother's womb, he may forget everything else, but he remembers the aspect of purva janma matram. Somebody who has perfectly followed varnashrama, followed the path of karma nicely. Such a person, he says that he may remember the prior births and how he suffered in those prior births, what kind of karma he did. This he may remember. Karmi jiva. Kaschit jnani sankhya. As far as jnani jiva is there, what he will remember in mother's womb is some sankhya principles and his cultivation of sankhya. And in that way, he feels determined that I will come out of mother's womb and I will practice this jnana again now. I don't want to suffer like this again entering into a mother's womb. So he feels inspired to take up that path of Sankhya and aspire for moksha. And Kaschit Yogo Yogam, Kaschit Yogi Yogam. And one who is yogi, he is reminded of yoga principles, Paramatma and Paramatma's meditation and all that. in mother's womb. And by that, he develops the determination to attain moksha and not again come back in a mother's womb like that. Kaschit bhaktas chaturvimsha pradhanat param panchavimsham purusham. And as far as bhakta is concerned, beyond the 24 elements, there is this 25th element of Supreme Lord. So sometimes Supreme Lord is 25th element, sometimes he is 26th also. Right? Bhagavat Sankhya is 28 elements. The atheistic Sankhya is 24 elements. So, Bhakta, the devotee, he remembers the Supreme Lord who is the 25th element. Parameshwaram abhyaset. He is reminded of Parameshwar and he prays to that Parameshwar. Those prayers are spoken in now the verse starting from 12. So, iti purvabhyastameva garbhe spuret iti yukte. So, whatever he has practiced in his prior life, a good amount of practice, that he will be inspired to remember in mother's womb, like that. So, this aspect of remembering it in mother's womb is only for this aspect that the child, such a child, he actually feels inspired. I mean, by God's arrangement, by Supreme Lord's arrangement, in that place called as mother's womb, somehow such a mahatmya of that place is there. Vamshidhar says that in that place the child is reminded of these principles, these transcendental paths, that way. And in that condition, the child takes shelter of the Supreme Lord, especially a devotee child. And we see that he prays to the Supreme Lord in this way. This is that Bhagyavan Jiva. This is that Jiva who is Bhakta Jiva, special Jiva. As far as the other children are just general child, that child is not reminded of anything in mother's womb. He just remains ignorant and comes out of mother's womb and then continues ignorance, or if he meets devotees, then he may also reform in this way. So Bhagavatam combines this two different versions into one version sometimes. Like we see that first 10 verses were talking about general suffering of a child. Suddenly in the 11th verse, now here in this section I'm saying, 10 verses were talking about a normal child. And suddenly in the 11th verse, you talk about a special child who starts praying to the Supreme Lord. So this is called as Bhedepi Ekavat Varnanam. Although the Bheda is there, two different accounts, sometimes Bhagavat merges them and speaks as one account. भेदेपि एकवत वर्णनम, भेद होते हुए भी एक जैसा वर्णन करना. So Jiva Goswami speaks this in his Kramasandha. So this sort of things happen sometimes in Bhagavatam. Like you remember another example of Bhedepi Ekvat Varnanam is the Varahadev. So in the third canto, in Varahadeva's description, we see that Shweta Varaha's description starts. Suddenly from that Shweta Varaha's description, the description changes to the Neela Varaha, and the black or blackish bluish Varaha. So there is no distinction made there. You first start talking about the white Varaha who comes from Brahma's nostril. The Neela Varaha comes from Garbhodak ocean. He does not come from Brahma's nostril. So the Varaha which comes from Brahma's nostril is said to be fighting Hiranyaksha later, which is not possible because in Swayambhav Manvantar there was no Hiranyaksha. Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, they were only there in the Chakshusha Manvantar. This pastime of Jai Vijay getting cursed happened at the end of fifth Manvantara. And in the sixth Manvantara, they were born as Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu. So there is no Hiranyaksha only in Swayambhu Manvantara. So how can Shvetvaraha kill the Hiranyaksha? So actually Neel Varaha is killing. But you read that section of third canto, 13th chapter, uh, you will not understand only that these two are different Varahas in that way. So that is Bhedepi Ekavat Varnanam. So the same thing is also applicable here. Two different accounts, one of a sadharan, Jantu, sadharan, very normal child who does not have any spiritual credits. And another is extraordinarily devoted child, the Bhakta Jiva. And these accounts are merged together. Uh, that's how this section is. Okay. So, yes. Prabhupada. When it is said that when a woman is having labor pain, she promises that she will never again become pregnant and suffer from such a severely painful condition. Similarly, the living entity, when put into hellish condition of life, prays to the Lord that he will never again commit sinful activities. So those prayers now we can see. He prays to the Lord for reformation, and he promises to the Lord that he will not now fall into this Maya. Uh, he seeks blessings from the Lord. But what happens is when he comes out of mother's womb, then we see he forgets everything. Of course, we see that he forgets everything means, by association of devotees, that memory is revived and then the child continues. But even such a saintly child, Bhagyavan Jiva also, when he comes out of mother's womb, such is the power of Maya. uh, and that experience of birth, it is such an intense experience. We see that because of power of Maya and all, even such a Bhagyavan Jiva may also forget. But Jiva Goswami mentions that by association, such a child immediately revives his memory and then he becomes stably situated in bhakti so as to attain spiritual world in the end, like that. But for others, it's very likely that they may forget it completely, like that. So that's how we see that. Especially for Karmi Jiva, who might just remember some suffering of prior lives in mother's womb. So he comes out and he may just forget that whole thing. There may be just complete forgetfulness of that suffering. For the yogi, jnani jivas, yes, they are also considered special. And such jivas, then they get introduced to the paths of yoga and jnana after coming out of mother's womb also. And then they become serious from that point onwards. Right. So that's the point. Yes, Pandurang Sharan Prabhu, what is the question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you. Nice description. And Prabhupada mentioning that point of worms, and we are brother very nicely. Prabhupada is mentioning not leaving the opportunity of universal brotherhood. With this point you explained, purport of first verse, you explained last time, but sorry, I could not recollect or didn't pay much attention. This during the Helena, because recently I went to one place also, preaching to one family. So this question had come, so wanted some clarity. But if you can just brief about it, mostly I briefed last time. This person, when he goes to hell, any living entity, so then he suffers only certain amount of sinful activities. I think you mentioned that time, not all. And then again, he's put in some hellish species, like in this purport also mentioned, dog and hog. He's put, and then but this applies to especially those jivas who go to Andhata Mishra, is mentioned in this purport. And then again, he gets a human form of life from where he started to degrade to hell. So this cycle, so I just want to understand the overall flow. Like first living entity, generally we heard that he's Brahma, then he degrades in consciousness, then comes to human form. Then that time maybe he's a goodness personified, but then again commits sins and then he has to suffer. So how, in briefly, if you can explain the cycle of this jiva, what is mentioned by in Prabhupada also.
No, actually, see, anadi karma phale is there, no? So usually it's, see, this sort of talk is not there in Shastra so much about which was the first birth, which is the first species taken by the human beings, because it is considered the ceaseless, unceasing law of material existence where one is just continuously there in the material world. So, sometimes, yeah, in one or two places, Prabhupada writes also that it is considered that when the living entity first takes birth in the material world, then he becomes Brahma. Huh? But that idea is also like, it's not considered a very standard idea. Prabhupada is also writing at least one purport I remember where he writes, where he says that some say, he is also not saying it like, this is the Shastra, or that's how it is. So whether anybody falls from the spiritual world, considering that they fall from spiritual world. So if they take Brahma's birth, not necessarily. Uh, it's not mentioned anywhere like that. Because then everybody will be Brahma, right? Uh, so it's not like that. Everybody is Brahma. And from that position, usually Brahma, in fact, the other contrary thing. Now, in the next chapter, you will see that usually Brahma and he becoming non-devotee, or rather he falling, is a very rare scenario. It doesn't happen only. Practically, it doesn't happen. Brahma falling down. So next verse, 30, chapter 32 will describe that very rarely some Brahma may fall down. Otherwise, Veda Garbha means, Brahma means he will go back home, back to Godhead at the end of his life. Uh, like that. His followers may come back. They enter into Mahavishnu and then they come back if they have not developed right attitude, devotional attitude. But Brahma, it doesn't happen with Brahma usually like that. No? So Brahma means he will go back home only. So if we assume that everybody was Brahma in their first life, then so many of them are falling, right? So that no longer remains a rare scenario. So that's why this idea was popularized by one of Bhaktisiddhanta's disciples, actually, that Jiva, when he desires first time, he wants to create something for Krishna, and that's why Krishna makes him Brahma. But this idea is not supported so much by Shastra. It was his one of his ways of explaining that particular thing, and that way. So then it was, yeah, it became famous in some parts of Gaudiya Math, and then Prabhupada may be also hinting that idea when he is speaking. In one place, at least I remember, where he says that. So that's how. So we can't speak about this aspect of, okay, what was the first birth? That is difficult to speak. Yeah, but Padma Puran does speak about this 84 lakh species and how the evolution is there. So usually speaking, if the living entity, suppose in human form of life, and then from that human form of life, they degrade to certain animal species. So now then, once they get into animal species, so then they follow a certain kind of evolution. huh? The evolution, just as mentioned, like aquatics, and then from there amphibians, quadrupeds, and then within quadrupeds also different modes. It will determine how they will proceed. But actually, karma is considered so complex that it is mentioned in Padma Puran itself that this evolutionary cycle also is not followed like. necessarily that's how it is. No. Karma is so complex that one may get into some animal species and then the karmic aspect from that animal species, it may not follow the natural evolution. The karma can pick him up and put into another species, which is actually degrading instead of elevating, or elevating instead of degrading. Uh, because the human form of karma, the karma generated in human form affects the position in the animal species also. So that karma which is generated in the human form of life, it can govern the animal species and from one species to animal species also in a certain way. So some generic understanding is being given, Prabhu, which tells about elevation in a certain manner, that way. But otherwise, yes, it's quite a complex scenario. Uh, Anything can happen, karmano gahnagati, in that way. So usually speaking, yes, there are these plants, and from plants one proceeds then to species which have more consciousness, like aquatics and all. From there, one proceeds to more active living entities of the land and all. From there, one may proceed to living entities which become the entry points in human form of life, like monkeys, like lion, or like cow. These are considered to be the entry points to human form of life, typically, generally speaking. So that's how it is. So it's not so discrete and so crystal clear that this is how the pattern is. Those 84 lakh species section from Padma Puran, it basically explains that yes, these all species, these many species are there. So in material world, the living entity can travel into all these species. How does it travel systematically? That idea, it's based on karma actually. Okay.
Yes, Roji. So certain part of his reaction he suffered in hell, then certain part is given in other species, then he comes to human, and this is only a part of total karma accumulated. Is it like that?
It is like that. It's true. It is only part, certain part of that total karma that is activated. So Sanchit karma remains, Prabhu. And that's what, like, the part that is activated, that is only prarabdha, no? Uh, Meaning now, when he takes a certain birth, uh, so then we see that that prarabdha is there. He has come with that prarabdha. Now he has to accept that prarabdha, whether happiness or distress. So apart from that prarabdha, sanchit minus prarabdha, so much of aprarabdha is there. So that will come in next lives, next so many lives probably. Uh, or if he takes to transcendental procedure, then he may burn that prarabdha, that whole thing. So that's how it's not that easy scenario actually to speak about. Certain principles are spoken by Shastra, that is.
Yeah, it's quite complex because first time only when he goes to hell, he has very less of whatever karma is accumulated. That should burn off and then, matlab, it's very complex certainly how it's accumulated and what is given in when he first does the sinful
Correct.
activity and
Like even whenever we hear in Shastra about, when Mahavishnu first puts the living entities in Mother Nature's womb, so, what determines what body they are going to get? So Shastra says, karma in the purva, like that. So they always speak like that only. Karma in the prior life, meaning prior existence in material world. So there is nothing like beginning. You don't talk about beginning. Nobody speaks like that in Shastra. It is anadhikaram phale. It is prior karma, previous karma, purva karma samskar vashat. Like that only it will speak, that way. So it's practically endless procedure. Prabhupada also said from time immemorial, right? In that way. So
Yes, yes, right. Yeah, and just second short thing that child also he's surrounded by his own urine and stool, or he doesn't pass urine and stool in that's mentioned in the bag. Surrounding is their mothers, but in the bag also his child also excretes during that time. Because of that, it's breeding place for worms and all other things, and is surrounded by stool and abominable condition.
maybe somebody can tell. I am also not so much expert on that. Yeah, it may be there, but if at all it is there, still because that amniotic fluid is sterile, so yes, it does not cause the child some sort of infection by those things and all. But yeah, I think I'm not sure as in the mother's womb what happens, whether the child also passes these motions and all that. Somebody else knows, maybe can tell. Uh, but yeah, in any case, yes, Prabhu, the child is there in that bag of stool and urine, no doubt, because uh, even whether mother's body or his own body like that, these conditions are there. uh, Surely they're there.
Yes, Chris, thank you.
Okay, Vilas Vardhan Prabhu, and then Parjanya Priya Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, one doubt I get whenever I hear about this is like this we see about Garbhadan Samskar, and then accordingly the child taking shelter of the Virya. So generally, like I don't know, it is observed that in devotee community, sometimes parents are very sincere, they're practicing also. But the child which they get is matlab it appears very difficult that to bring him to devotional service path, sincere path properly. Whereas we see that when we are preaching to outside people, we get so sincere, dedicated sadhakas, and although their parents are not at all devotee, it doesn't seem that they were having that kind of consciousness while creating him, at all. So how this happens, it appears little difficult to understand, probably.
Yeah, yes, it is. It is true, actually. It is sometimes seen like that, many, many times, in fact, in our society also, that way. So, yes, Prabhu, it is like factor of, how the parents are and how very, like, how sincerely they have been praying for such a child, uh, how much intense their desires are for such a thing, for having such a child. So these factors also matter. What matters is also like what influences is also the prior karma, actually. The parents' ability to be able to draw a child of that caliber, that is also influenced by their prior karma. Whether, it's not just that at the time of conception, what sort of consciousness and their intense prayers and all, but another factor that is in consideration is by their karma, what kind of child they deserve also. Huh? Of course, Krishna can overpower that karma easily. He can override if the prayers are very, very sincere. But we see that, yeah, the way Krishna deals with karma is also that he sometimes just keeps it as it is. He doesn't so much play with that. Uh, he may allow that karma and all to change to considerable degree after some time when they make great advancement or like that. So yes, it that factor is also there. That what kind of progeny you will get, it is also decided by prior karma. Now, not everything is decided. So certainly by prayers and all, by Krishna's mercy, they may be able to also attract another soul, which was not so much there in their karma, this way. But yes, these factors are there. Just like even we see after spending a lot of years in bhakti, still sometimes people's swabhav doesn't change. Why? Because he has come by bringing a certain prarabdha, that his subtle body works in a certain way, gross body works in a certain way. Now, bhakti can change those aspects also, but how quickly that change can be seen in an individual depends also. It depends on his own practice and also Krishna, whether he wants such a change in his life, whether he's approving such a change in his life. Mm. So this factor is there at the time of that conception also. Uh, what kind of a child one is qualified to receive. If Krishna sees not so much qualification is there for having such a child, he may not give also. Uh, or he may give, depends on his mercy, whatever. But that factor also should be kept in consideration. So many times we see that the children of devotees, they may not be so much interested in Krishna consciousness. Of course, but what happens is by the association which they receive in Krishna conscious society. So we see that eventually those children do come back to bhakti and they may become serious devotees also. But in their youth, in their teenage years and all, they may not be interested in Krishna consciousness. Sometimes it is also familiarity breeds contempt, right? Practical consideration, because they see right from childhood this culture, and they may only see the culture. The parents may never bother about teaching them the philosophy, the shastra. This is another practical consideration. I'm also sharing some practical considerations. See, the parents may be very much interested in teaching child the cultural aspects. उसके हाथ पहुंचते नहीं तो भी उसको मृदंग सिखाने का है, like that. But they don't want to teach Gita, They don't want to teach Bhagavatam. They don't want to teach Sanskrit. Why not? Sometimes the fear is there that if he learns Shastra too much, then he will become brahmachari. So we want him to be situated in Grahasthashram. He should practice nicely. So you don't want to educate him in philosophy, but you want to educate him in cultural aspect. So at the teenage years, his Bhasmasur intelligence is going to ask questions then. And that time, then if they have not given him answer or they can't give him an answer, then they become extremely rebellious. But if you see children who are educated right from beginning, they were very nicely taught Shastra. They can only answer questions themselves. They don't, they are not thinking like, you see, in teenage and all, there is this intelligence works like this, no? Asking tough questions, one feels like he is like conqueror of the world. One feels like, oh, just see, I'm asking such questions to my parents. They being devotee by from 20 years, still they cannot answer. Just see my intelligence. So this sort of ideas are there. So if they're educated nicely, then they can also, yes, be convinced that this is quite a logical and very proper presentation. So I have seen many examples where if the child was educated very nicely in philosophy and in interesting manner and all, then they become very good devotees also this way. But only culture, no philosophy, or only philosophy, no culture, these are not very practical scenarios. So those are few thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you. Very, very comforting.
Thank you. Parjanya Priya Prabhu, yeah, you had a question.
Krishna Prabhuji. So Prabhuji, I have two small questions. First is this, your Madhyastha mein, we are going to the middle, this Nigati hai. So, but we see in fifth canto that demigods want to have this birth in Bharatvarsha. And we see again in fifth canto that this middle planetary system have so many places except Bharatvarsha, 9 Varshas are there. तो इसका exactly मतलब क्या है? Because one way we are seeing that human birth is the most important birth, and another way we are seeing that there are subterranean heavenly planets. So they are talking about subterranean heavenly planets here, or something like that. I guess you got my
As,
question.
yeah. As per Vamshidhar, here Madhya Tishtanti Rajasa, and especially Rajasi Gati refers to being born in a human form of life in Bharatvarsh, as per Vamshidhar. So he says that this section is not talking about being born in planets on Bhuloka where the living condition is like heavenly planets, like subterranean heavenly planets, if we want to use that term. So he says it is primarily talking about being born in a condition where we see that the condition is not heavenly like that. So especially we see in Bharatvarsha, mm, and we see that the system of four yugas is there, uh, right? We see that system of four yugas is not there everywhere, uh, even on Bhuloka. uh, so it's there on in Bharatvarsha. So we see that he's speaking about that factor, uh, Bhuloka, and also Bhuloka kind of standard of living. That's what he's speaking. He says where there is a heavenly standard on other varshas and all that, that is not being referred as Rajasi Gati. That will be Satviki Gati as per him.
But
Okay.
Prabhuji, it seems more like a benediction. You are getting a human form of life.
Yeah, it is. No, it is certainly, Prabhu, a benediction only. Why not? So it is a benediction, but point is Satviki, Rajasi, Tamasi, all three kinds of births one may have, no? So now within that also, so a bare minimum platform of human form of life as a benediction is accepted only here. But in these gatis that one has, like Satviki Gati, Tamasi Gati, and all that, here the Rajasi Gati is especially talking about aspect of human form of life with that influence of Rajoguna, with that influence of uh, ignorance of the Shastras. So that's how such a person, when he is born, such a person, then he remains caught up into family life and sensual pleasures and all these aspects. So it's a it's a lifetime which is considered to be uh, benediction. It's a benediction because human form of life is there. But how is he utilizing that form? That is also being shown over here. It is not being utilized as indeed the true benefit of human form of life, that way. So you see, Shastras speak from multiple perspectives. The perspective of human form of life, why it is considered a benediction? Because here it is very easy to practice bhakti. One can practice bhakti and go back home, back to Godhead. So from that angle, devatas want to come here. But still, devatas never visit, this material, this bhuloka in Kali Yuga. Why do they not visit if they're aspiring so much to come? Because it is also considered a very fallen place. It is not considered urdhvam gachanti. There are higher planets which are considered higher only than bhuloka. That's why they are higher. Swarga and further, because the consciousness, the refinement, the caliber of the people there is much, much higher than the human beings. But asti eko mahan guna, there is one special quality in that human form, which is that if one takes the bhakti process, association, then one can perfect the life in that way, which is very difficult in heavenly planets. And certainly in the lower planets also, it is very difficult. So in situation of human form of life, there is certain benediction. But does that mean that it puts Bhuloka higher than the Svargaloka or further planets. No, it is not like that. It is considered lower only, lower than those planets. Is that okay?
Thank you, Prabhuji. And one more small question. Why this Karmi Jiva is, how he is able to pray? Because by Jnana Marg and by Yoga Marg you can achieve moksha. And Jiva Goswami says only who is achieving moksha in this life he will pray. But Karmi, who has performed Karma Kanda, he cannot achieve moksha. So how he is able to pray?
No, he is not also said to be somebody who is praying. It is mentioned, you can see, I was clarifying that point. I also did not say that Jnani Jiva prays. That is also not true. Yogi Jiva also does not pray. The prayer is prayer, the one who prays. The one who makes prayer is only the Bhakta Jiva. So what happens to the other? So he says, Jnani Sankhyam Samabhased. That is Garbhopanishad. So such a person in the womb of the mother, he is reminded of the Sankhya that he has learned, cultivated, and then such a jiva, while coming out of mother's womb, after coming out, then such a person follows that path. So they are not said to be praying, Prabhu. It's just that it is talked about the cultivation of certain spiritual principles. So then that goes with them, and that is reminded them in the mother's womb. That aspect is only being spoken. So as far as Karmi Jiva is concerned, what is the memory that they have? They have this memory that actually I was born so many times and I died so many times and I again took the birth. So life after life, I'm suffering like this. This is what they are reminded of. So there is difference in the memory also, what sort of memory comes to their mind. And then whether that memory makes them take shelter of Supreme Lord, no, that is not being spoken. It's just the aspect of that they remember these things, and then when they come out of mother's womb, then they practice these things. That is being spoken.
I got the
Okay.
difference. So prayer only devotee can do, and the devotee who has done the prayer, it is his last life. And remembrance can come to any of these three, and it doesn't mean that it is their last life. Remembrance of
right.
their what they have practiced in the previous life, that thing can come to any of these three. That's why
Yes.
any of the jiva can remember his past life, like 100 past life was written here. So any of the jiva can remember, but doing prayer is only specific to a very advanced devotee.
That is right. That is right.
Yes.
See, any that aspect of Kaschit Karmi, so there also, Prabhu, Kaschit it is mentioned. So that kind of memory that I have suffered for so many lifetimes and all, that is also rare. It is not everybody will do. Everybody will get that kind of memory. No, Kaschit, कोई तो विरला, ऐसा अर्थ है उसका. कोई तो विरला कर्मी जीव जो है, he remembers like that. Punashchaham, punasmritah, punashchaham jatah. I was born so many times and all in that particular manner. So he considers that this is such a suffering and he decides that I will not now again enter into my mother's womb. In that way, that sort of resolve comes in him. Similarly with Gyanis, similarly with yogis, and these are all very rare souls because they are not general jivas. The practitioners of these paths are rare people. So that's how all these four categories are spoken. They are some rare souls only. Usually, point is, apart from those rare souls, the general jiva, the child in the womb, he will not remember anything. It's just completely ignorant condition. Nothing comes into his mind. He may just be unaware, of the scenario. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Doubts got clear.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Narhari Thakur, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Most of the things are clear, but just extension of the question that Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that भजी वो भूलिया ऐसे संसार बिखेरे भूलिया रही लो तुम्हें अविद्या भर. So in that it is says that it is appear that he is saying about the prayerful jiva in the womb. So when one comes out and he forgets the supreme law, so it appears that with one who is going to back to Godhead, he also forgets. And the sadhaka was with practicing means neophyte devotees. So how to discriminate? Means we don't discriminate, but judgmental point of view. But how to understand this that one jiva is going to go back to Godhead in this life, and this jiva is prayed and this jiva is not, because everyone is practicing the symptom is similar actually, means engage in devotional service. So different categories engaged in devotional service. So those who jivas has prayed in the womb, how we can have such understand this possibility.
Yeah, we may not be able to understand till the time they go back to God. Uh,
Yeah.
right? So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur prays in his prayers like that. So he's showing a general condition. See, later in text 22, Vishwanath Chakravarti explains that 22, 23, that in this chapter only, that even for Bhagyavan Jiva, one who has prayed to the Supreme Lord, the nature of material birth and the nature of Maya is like this, that after coming out, even such a Jiva may forget the Lord. And it's just that Lord arranges the association in such a way that sooner such a person comes in the association, and then we can see that the way the swift advancement is happening in such a person's life, that he is actually a very, very serious devotee, right? A devotee right from his prior life. So that's how. So whether such a person, I mean, we may just not know that whether somebody has prayed or not, like that. So usually speaking, it is mentioned that one who prays to the Lord in mother's womb, then that is the last life. Jiva Goswami says that it's the last life. So one criterion is certainly there, that one who goes back home, back to Godhead, that person, he must have prayed to the Supreme Lord in mother's womb. Uh, It is sure. But for others, it's difficult to tell. And we don't have to judge also that factor, not needed only, no. The irrespective of whether we prayed to Supreme Lord or we did not pray, now we can pray. Certainly, by Prabhupada's mercy, we got bhakti and process of bhakti. So actually, as a sadhaka, what we have done in prior life is should not be a concern so much. It's always about what we can do next. Sometimes we have some, I mean, I'm just saying general, sometimes in some places, people have a lot of curiosity about the past life, what they have done past, but they're not so curious about what they should do ahead, uh, like that, isn't it? What I was in my previous life. So people want to go to Bhrugu and, so many places that way. So even if sometimes you come to know, what can you do actually? Whatever is gone, right? Uh, so that's how, yeah, whether somebody has practiced in prior life or not, certainly one should practice seriously. Now that one has received Krishna consciousness, but can practice seriously. But yes, as per what you have asked, one criterion is that one who has prayed to the Supreme Lord, that's his last life. That is it. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
Guruji. Thank you, Guruji.
Yes. Okay. So, all right, then I think it is 4:30 now. So we will do these prayers tomorrow's session. About 10 prayers are there, 10. And then the rest of the section is not so much philosophical. It can be done quickly. So we'll try to see if we can finish this chapter tomorrow. If not, something may remain, some 5, 6 verses in the end. That's all. At least the prayers we can certainly finish. I was planning to finish 3-4 prayers today, but yeah, no problem. We can do it tomorrow.
Which is this Gyani and Karmi Jiva, which is there. His destination is moksha for sure, if he remembers like that, or maybe may not be. Because devotee is going back to what that is clear. Who is praying.
Yeah. It is said that, yeah, Prabhu, like for devotee, it is said clearly, but for the Gyanis and Yogis, they will pursue their paths. So naturally, their paths will lead them to the moksha only. So that is what is spoken here. Like Jiva Goswami says very clearly that they will be directed to their own pursuits of Sankhya, Yoga, and all. But as far as the devotees, for the devotee, it is said that he glorifies the Lord, and then he never comes back in the material world again. That's how it is very clearly spoken. But for yogi, jnani, he does not tell about what will happen to them in the sense that do they attain moksha in the same lifetime. The whole talk is about the devotee who is praying. That person, by his prayers and by his intensity of expression to the Supreme Lord, Supreme Lord blesses him. See, basically, the jiva asks for that benediction that I never be born again in a mother's womb, and then the Supreme Lord blesses that benediction. And then the Jivatma comes out of mother's womb, so receiving that benediction. So because Lord has blessed him, so naturally he will attain the spiritual world in the same lifetime. But for others, it is not spoken like that because they don't pray to the Supreme Lord like that. But after coming out, they will certainly cultivate their paths. Tatratam buddhi samyogam labante paurvade, Krishna also says. So we can understand that much at least very clear. That way.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Pujit, tomorrow at same 2 o'clock.
Yeah, 2 o'clock. Tomorrow we can start 2 o'clock. 2.5 hours we will be able to have.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, then see you all tomorrow. Granthra Srimad Bhagavat Puranam ki,
So,
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Thank you, Pujit.
Thank you.